Hello, and welcome to Ajiabiala and Igbo podcast. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a video recording and actually an interview of Joy Ufomadu, who is an author, actress, I think a bunch of other things as well.
Yes, I am Joy Ufomadu. I am an author, actress, aspiring everything. I'm a disability professional at a university. I actually have a background in education, so I was a high school teacher for a while. So again, I love everything, so I give it a try. But yes, so today we're going to talk a little bit about a few things about me, but more so my author lane.
Yes, awesome. And so I'm super duper excited to be doing this because you are going to be coming out with a book soon that shines light on a subject that I've recently learned a bit more about and that I think is just incredibly important, and that's autism spectrum disorder.
Yes. I have a new book that's coming out actually mid-September. And I have it here so I can show it.
Yes.
Yes, I have to do my little plug, but it's called Chinyeri's Brother.
Okay.
And it is about autism spectrum disorder. It's about a young man who, his family ends up finding out that he has autism spectrum disorder. And so we get to see how they adjust, and how they celebrate him. And, I try to embed just different things in there that I want people to grasp about having a loved one with autism, having a loved one with disabilities in general. So, yeah.
Awesome. And so I understand that this is your second book?
Yes, this is my second book. So I have another book, the first installment to the Chinyeri series. And that book is called Chinyeri. And so that book is actually about Chinyeri. She is a preteen starting middle school, and she actually ends up finding out that she's different on her first day of middle school. Students hear her name. And she is the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. So they end up realizing that she's different. They laugh at her name. And so we just get to kind of see her go through adjusting to that and, kind of learning who she is. And then just embracing that and actually like even wearing things to show how proud she is of her culture.
Wow, wonderful. And these are children's books, correct?
Yes, these are children's books, but I like to say that anybody can benefit from them. Like the person who's reading it to the child, I've read it to high school students and they loved it. So I really feel like although it's wrapped and packaged as a children's book, like it's literally like anybody's book.
Yeah, and it definitely has a timeless message because I'm sure a lot of us have experienced like feeling different or having our name be different. And even like that point in time, as you were saying with Chinyere in the book, where you start to just embrace it and you just, start loving all parts of your identity. So it does sound pretty timeless.
Yes. And that's what I want people to leave with my books. Like,
But so I just wanted to ask you, when/how did your awareness of autism spectrum disorder come about? Because I know for me, it's something that I've started to understand a little bit about more recently, but it's still almost an anomaly. Like it's just such as it's called a spectrum. It can look like so many different things, presents itself in so many different ways with different people. And I feel like there's just not a lot of awareness about it. So when did your own awareness about this disorder come about?
So I'll say at a pretty young age, maybe as a preteen, my brother was diagnosed with autism.
Okay.
And so that was the first time we had ever heard of it. And so, it was something where we were like, okay, we knew that there were some differences in communication and certain behaviors that we didn't necessarily recognize, but we didn't quite know what it was. And so that was when I first actually heard of autism and kind of observe some behaviors that are associated with it. But in terms of really learning about autism, really actually getting scientific knowledge and actually tools for working with individuals with autism, that actually happened like in college. I got my bachelor's in special education. And so that's where I learned a lot about autism. And then in practice as a teacher, and even now I'm still learning more as a disability professional and just as a personal researcher, because I still feel like I have a personal interest in autism with my little brother.
Right.
So yeah, that's where it started, and it's just my knowledge is continuing to evolve. Honestly, as everyone's knowledge is evolving, because new things come out all the time about autism.
Definitely. But so even this story is pretty personal for you. The story
Mhm.
about.
Absolutely, it's very personal, and honestly, I couldn't imagine writing about something that I haven't experienced in some way. I don't know, that just kind of like legitimizes it for me, and then it also just kind of helps me to turn any negative feelings that might have been like somewhere deep down inside. It helps me to make them positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. And so in this story, why was it important to tell Ihechis' story? I'm guessing that part of it relates to your own experience with your own brother, but specifically when you think of the character of Ihechi, why was that important to you?
I think it's important to give people with special needs, people with autism, a voice. And so it was really important for me to add details in the book about what he likes to do.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we'll find that, especially if a person doesn't use talking as their primary mode of communication,
Yeah.
we find that we make decisions for them. We choose what they like, we choose what they wear. And so I thought it was important for Ihechi to be shown with personality. I thought it was important to show that there is that people with autism, they like certain things and they like to do things outside of the house. It's not just kind of that stereotypical, math, science, computers. No, there's so much more. And so that was important for me to like give people with autism a voice.
Yeah.
And to be an advocate, of course, without forcing my beliefs or my personal story on them.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. So what are some aspects or important aspects of autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD for short, compared to other disorders that you want to bring to the limelight?
Mhm. I think that there is still a lot of uncertainty and like discomfort that people experience when talking about ASD.
Yeah.
I think that because, it is a spectrum,
Yeah.
it's hard for people to kind of conceptualize one person on one end of the spectrum, has the exact same disorder as the other person on the other end. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's just a lot of ambiguity with it. And so I think that, I think it may also cause some fear and stigma. And I think that it's important, to bring autism spectrum disorder to the forefront, and encourage people to learn more about it. I feel like there are other diagnoses that we hear about, and it's just kind of like, okay, but I think, a lot of times when people hear that someone has autism spectrum disorder, they obviously they go into like these preconceived notions. Again, they feel uncomfortable, or these stereotypes of like certain characters that we've seen on TV kind of come in their head. So I think it's just important for people to know that everybody on this earth is different. Like just because you share the same disorder doesn't mean that you're the exact same person as someone else with the disorder.
Right. And I like to how you put it that everyone on this earth is different. Like we all have differences, some in which are more acceptable to society and others that make us stand out a bit more to society. But I think that's the beautiful thing about having books like your upcoming one that normalizes our differences, that help us not to, break down those wall of stigma. So I think that's absolutely amazing.
Exactly. And autism is characterized by like social deficits or social differences. And so, like, okay, that's where a lot of the stigma comes from, because we are so used to behaving and operating in our norm. And a lot of times we have trouble with accepting or embracing other people's norms. It's not meant for you to change it to your normal, it's meant for you to allow them to have their normal, and you guys either be friends or family members, but it's meant for you to accept them. And so I think that that is a huge thing that makes autism different. It's just the social aspect of it.
Yeah. And so in your book, what theme do you want the readers to leave with when they're reading it?
Yeah, I want them to leave with a few themes, and some are not even like full phrases, but again, advocacy. I
Mm.
want them to leave knowing that, like I said earlier, that every single person is different. I want them to leave feeling like, if they are a person with autism spectrum disorder or any other disability, that it's okay to be themselves. And if they have friends or family members who don't accept it, they don't have to be in close proximity with them. And so I want people to just leave refreshed and wanting to share this with others, because I don't think that there's a person on this earth who hasn't been affected by disability in some way. And at this point, I think that there are many of us who know, or maybe are even close to a person with autism spectrum disorder, or they have that themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And so, what are some unique challenges faced by the Igbo community when dealing with a person with ASD? And then as well as how do you think we can begin to overcome that? So I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about your personal experience or just what you feel being an Igbo woman are some of the challenges that we face with dealing with something like ASD.
I think that in terms of our culture, I think that we pride ourselves in success. And so I think that sometimes we tend to look at a difference like autism as a failure. And so I think that that is something that we need to change completely, and just realize that whether it's our brother, cousin, son, daughter, that their characteristics, their diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder is not a failure. It is not a cause of shame to the family. It is not a form of punishment, and that it is something that the more we learn about, the more that we can be an ally and an advocate. And so I think that one of the biggest things that we have to do, especially as the person who is not the individual with autism, but the family member, or the friend, I think one thing that we have to do is not make it about ourselves, and just, forget about what other people think. Because, sometimes as Evos, we do care, because we have that sense of that crown of pride, But I think, you can still have that confidence and that pride and that family integrity while still embracing that person and learning more about what their needs are, and meeting those needs if you can.
Definitely. And I think you brought up a bunch of really great points. Like, first of all, in general, diseases that are or disorders that aren't as like palpable as like, oh, you cut yourself, you fell, or this or that. I think is something that our community struggles with a lot. Like,
Yeah.
even when talking about mental health disorders, which is
Yeah.
like one reason I have to shout them out real quick. I don't know if you've heard of Talk Ninja.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's founded by some wonderful young Igbo professionals, Chinonso, Uche, and Joy, I think a few other people, but it basically brings to light mental health issues in our communities, which is so, so important
That
because
is needed, yes.
or it's things that we don't talk about, it's things that are closeted. And I can imagine with autism, it's also something that's not really talked about, that's closeted. And I think you brought up some really great points about shame. That's another really big thing in our community about like the shame that we feel, how will other people perceive it. And I could even imagine, Igbo parents kind of thinking like, oh, what did I do to cause this? Or, what curse, or what, like just
Yeah.
all these different understandings of it that kind of take away from the individual, focuses on ourselves. Not to say that like the family of people who deal with it aren't also dealing with something, because I'm sure they are, and that is an important aspect of it. Like the family deals with autism. But I just think we just have to shift our perspective a little bit. And I'm super duper excited that there's a book like this that will help us start making those types of steps.
Absolutely, yes. I love that. Yeah, shifting our perspective, and totally taking ourselves out of it, and again forgetting what other people have to say, and just really focusing on how we can be an asset to our family member. And I dealt with it personally. I can say from my experience, I did deal with shame, growing up in America, already being different, and then having a brother with autism, and now I sometimes even feel embarrassed to say I was ashamed, but at the time I was embarrassed that this was happening. And it wasn't that I didn't love him. I spent, one summer like teaching him different songs. Like we were just we were very, very close. And so it wasn't I didn't love him, but I thought that like my shame was protecting him in a way. So I thought, kind of hiding him, or, I would have friends over and he would come down and I'd be like, go to your room, like really quickly, like, and I feel terrible now, but that was like, I thought that was protecting him, like, because I was trying to be sure that nobody would say like, what's wrong with him? When that, honestly, when I told my friends, I think they already knew, but they were kind of like, well, why didn't you tell us sooner? And I'm like, I was just so worried that they would think something was wrong with us as a family and just him in general. And nothing is wrong. He happens to have autism spectrum disorder, and people happen to have a lot of things. So yeah, I would really love to change that notion, that idea of shame, change that.
Definitely. And I think the example that you brought up definitely brings the point of that the person deals with it, but the family deals with it. Like, it's a growing thing for everybody. And I think there shouldn't even be shame in your experience of it, because you had to grow. You're like, I'm sure you're young, not sure how to handle it. Like you said, feeling like you're protecting. So I think that's a really beautiful aspect of it. And I wonder, in this book that's coming, do you talk about Chinyera's experience with like dealing with her brother with autism, or is it just solely focused on Ihechis?
So we do kind of touch on that. Again, it's pretty short because it's a children's book, but there is a portion of the book, I almost called it a scene because I kind of look at it as scenes, but where Chinyere and her brother and sister are like, they're just having a moment where they're like, what's going on? They have these little secret meetings that he wasn't a part of initially, and they're like, what's going on? So they kind of show that. And then Chinyere kind of goes on to get like really close with him, which is, again, my experience. So I just put that in the book. And so we do see how she goes from like standoffish or like, what can we do? I don't understand this, to like, they become the best of friends, so we do get to see that evolution.
Awesome. Beautiful. Another question I wanted to ask is, was there a specific reason that Cam, Ihechis' best friend, didn't have ASD?
Yes, definitely. I thought it was important to add a friend to the element. Initially it was just going to be Ihechi and his family. But I wanted to show that people with autism spectrum disorders have friends. And that you do not have to have a specific diagnosis to be friends with someone else, and so I think a lot of times people want to, almost pair people together and say, oh, well, you have this, and again, these are people on the outside, thinking that that's what is best, but really, again, talking is just one form of communication, so if a person does not use talking or speaking as their primary form, there's still several other ways to communicate, like writing, like gestures, and so I wanted to show people that, if you haven't thought about gaining a friend, and I don't mean going out and looking, but I mean, if you've been standoffish about becoming friends with people with autism spectrum disorder, or just any disorder in general, like, to rethink that, because there are other ways to communicate. There's so much that you can learn from each other. And it doesn't even have to be like you're turning this into a project. Like, it should be normalized. It should be natural.
Right. Definitely. And so we talked a little bit about advocacy when we started this discussion. But so one of the questions in the back of your book refers to Ihechis' family as advocates. Can you share more about how your book influences advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like, even with us seeing, Chinyere becoming super close to Ihechi and teaching him things. And there's also a portion where the book talks about how Ihechi, how his brother and sisters, once they understood, they never let anybody say anything negative to him, so they protected him. But it wasn't the type of protection that I was doing. It was a protection like, we're all out together, but if something happens, we'll stand in. So, that was a form of advocacy. Even, between Ihechi and his best friend, Cam, them being friends, Cam kind of being there with him and, standing up for him if needed, that is a form of advocacy. And so I feel that once people change their perceptions to like, this is not a thing of shame. Yes, you can be friends with someone with autism spectrum disorder. I think that the advocacy will come into play where, people build these relationships with either their family members or others who have autism spectrum disorder. And they, anytime that you hear something that's negative or that doesn't align with, what about autism spectrum disorder, you can shut it down.
Right.
If there's a person who needs like additional assistance, in social situations, you can be there for them without recording it on, and putting it on social media. It just becomes like, you're uneasy when you
Yeah.
see something like that happening. And so that's what I want, is just to change the perception, humanize these people,
Yeah.
so that the advocacy becomes innate in people.
Definitely. Definitely. So a little bit specific, Chinyera's parents share that it's helpful to give Ihechi choices. Can you
Mhm.
talk more about why it was important to add that to the book?
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like choices are key. Like, I feel like that's what makes us human. Like, even, I'm thinking about even in the pandemic, like you could be a homebody, but like knowing you can't go anywhere, like that, it changes everything, right? And so
Definitely.
I feel the same way about people who maybe talking is not their first form of communication. Making decisions for them is just absolutely unfair. And I realized that even again in my family, I would make a lot of decisions for my brother. But I actually, went home and kind of was doing some quarantining with my family for a few months, just, from April to August, actually to early August. And I spent a lot of time with my brother, and he's 20 now. But, we still, sometimes we would go into like, do this or come here, and all that. But I just decided to start giving him choices. And like, once I started giving him choices, like I would notice that like sometimes he would say no, like normally, it'll be like one, you give one direction and he just goes ahead and does it. But with choices, he would decide like, no, I want to wear this, or I want to go inside now, because we would exercise together and stuff. So, I just saw how much freer he appeared, like once he started having choices to do stuff, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I just think it's important to not forget that the feelings that you feel are the feelings that this person has as well. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't feel like doing it, or sometimes that's not the food that you want. I just think, again, with being an advocate, part of that is if you're close with that person or have any type of like influence, I feel like it's so important to humanize them and let them decide for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the key word to it, because have a choice is like, it's just a human right. It's just part of being human. And we kind of forget that with people, especially if they communicate differently or
Mhm.
just we don't understand them as well. So I think that's absolutely amazing.
Mhm.
So without giving the book away, I will say that it's clear that Ihechi's family experienced growth by the end of the book. Would you agree with that synopsis?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Ihechi's family from the beginning, there was, you could see some of that shame or that like overwhelm with the diagnosis. And towards the end, it was normalized. And so, and he was normalized and humanized. So, yes, absolutely.
And so with the nature of this book, I'm sure you could have wrote like a 150 page worth of this or even more. How are you
Mhm.
able to condense it to like say all the things that you wanted to say, get across the points you wanted to get across, and still keep it to a pretty easy read?
Yeah, that was hard because again, you're thinking about your actual life, so you want to add in all these different things that actually did happen. So I
Right.
did have to trim it down a lot, and I really found myself, and I didn't do this with my first book, but I really found myself asking myself with each page, what do you want the reader to get from this? And so that helped me to really condense it from like being super wordy, all this dialogue. What do you want them to get from this page? What do you want them to get from this page? And so that was how I was able to make it digestible, make it readable. So it was a challenge though, because I can talk.
Definitely. So is there anything else in terms of your book that you'd like the viewers to know? Thing you want to share?
Yeah, I just want to say that, even if a person wasn't to purchase the book, I definitely want people to change or at least start thinking about changing their perception of disability, particularly autism spectrum disorder. So again, those concepts of shame and guilt and embarrassment, to really start rethinking that, have some introspective thinking moments, and see if you hold some of those feelings, and kind of change that. And then also just kind of challenge yourself. Again, I don't say go out and search for someone with autism spectrum disorder to kind of fulfill some sort of need to be good. But I
Yeah.
mean, if there is someone in your presence or in your family that you could be a lot closer to, but you've been apprehensive, really rethink that. And again, choices. Like, I really want people to leave with, give the person choices. Do not make decisions for people, and really just view them as like, this person has the same feelings that I do. You know, they just may express it in a different way. So.
But so we do want people to go out and purchase it. And luckily, you could actually get, I think, 10% off if you use Igbo Podcast code.
Yes. Please use that code. You can get 10% off. Go ahead and pre-order now. It's available on my website.
Awesome. So it's available on your website. What's your website?
So it is chinyerithebook.com.
Okay.
And so, and I can spell it Chinyerethebook.com. So it's available there. And I want to say that my website is interactive. So, you know, if you have someone who is a child, or even up until a preteen, I have activities on there for like mental health, like word searches. I have like information about Chinyere. We have like a Chinyere creed, and information about me if anybody would want to like book me for like an interview like this, or even a virtual classroom reading. So my website is pretty interactive. Check it out.
Will do. And I'll also link the website in this as well. And so can the book only be purchased pre-order right now through your website? Is it also available on Amazon and all those other places?
Yes, so it can be pre-ordered through my website or through Amazon.
Okay, nice. This was incredibly rewarding, and I'm super excited and appreciative to have such a book be just in existence, because I think it's so, so important. And I also think it's important to talk about this disorder in the community. So like Black people, but then even now Africans, and then bringing it all the way home to our Igbo people.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I thank you for this opportunity. I love what you're doing with Igbo Podcast, and like I'm just always so inspired by that. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your viewers.
Thank you. So to end it, just a quick fun question about, so why do you love being Igbo?
Oh my gosh. So do we have time for this?
I know, right?
I love it like so much more now that I'm older, again, because like I was fighting it growing up, you know, living in America and feeling weird. But now, I mean, oh my gosh, like my mom, she has sayings for days. Like if I need a saying for, should I make this sandwich? There is a quote for that. If I need a saying for, should I go out today? Like there is, I love our sayings. I love the deep root in culture. I love the deep root in respect. I love the deep root in pride. And I'm talking about the good kind of pride, like the pride, like my head is up. Like I don't care what happened today. My head is up. So I love that. And even down to our names, like, oh my gosh, so beautiful with so much meaning. You know what I mean? So those are just a few of the things. And I love our food.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I'm looking forward to this, everyone having access to this jewel, this upcoming book.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Bye.